Welcome again to our near-death experience interview series. I'm Robert Mays. Suzanne and I have researched near-death experiences for the past 15 years. We are interviewing people who have had an NDE and who have also received visions of future world events. This series is part of our research project, which was approved by the Academic and Research Committee of IANS, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. In these interviews, we're exploring NDErs' insights into the deeper meaning of the challenges currently facing humanity, such as the pandemic and the social and political polarization of our society. What advice do NDErs have for coping with and responding to these challenges? We'll pause here to bring in today's guest.
We are here again with Rabbi Stephen Robbins of Congregation Neve Shalom in Los Angeles. He is also co-founder of the Academy for Jewish Religion, California, the first trans-denominational rabbinic and cantorial school. Stephen is also a clinical psychologist with a specialty in the psychoneuroimmunology of trauma, which brings together the spiritual, the physical, and brain development to help patients respond to trauma. Stephen has had a total of 7 NDEs in his life. During each NDE, he received a prophetic vision, a message, or a mission. We will continue to explore these experiences in this session. Welcome again, Rabbi Robbins.
And again, thank you for the invitation and the privilege of being able to share what wisdom and experience I gained from my transits.
Stephen, we'll go through your NDEs so far. Your first NDE occurred at your birth in May 1944. Your second NDE occurred in June 1964 from hepatitis. Your third NDE occurred in 1987 from complications from influenza. And your fourth NDE occurred in December 1991 from lung collapse.
Yes.
These are covered in our earlier interviews.
So to start off, Stephen, could you answer what is the real meaning of prophetic visions from your perspective of your NDEs?
The sole purpose that each of us have is a compression of what we in this world see as past, present, and future. In other words, living in the world of sequence, which is what happens in physical reality. So there's 1, 2, 3, A, B, C, up, down, in, out. And in the world of spiritual consciousness, there is no sequence because all things are happening constantly at all levels. The prophetic vision is about the tikkun, the part of the world that you come into, that it is your responsibility to help bring to some level of completion. Remember, I said in the beginning that Judaism, from its very earliest conception, viewed the world neither as sinful or painful or evil, but as simply unfinished, and that humans and the Holy One were in partnership for that, making that completion happen. And so each of us serve as a vessel of a unique element of God's presence. And by enacting that spiritual quality in each of us that gives us talents, capacities to do it, and deficits that keep us from wandering astray. When we follow those paths, we are fulfilling the vision that the Holy One has for each of us in our separation from the core into the unique soul being. The word prophetic is, of course, an English word. The word in Hebrew for prophet is navi, and the word navi in its simplest form is to be one who speaks forth for God, so that the prophet never is pictured as one who has unique powers and is to be adulated. In fact, frequently the prophets in the Hebrew Bible were excoriated and punished and hated and rejected, as was Jeremiah, who was thrown into a pit and was rescued by his followers who took him to Egypt when the temple fell. But these prophets all had a message to warn the Israelite people that because they were relying on the temple offerings rather than their own interpersonal behaviors, that they were in fact setting up the foundations that would crumble and that there would come conquerors that would take them. The first set of prophets, Amos, Hosea, and the others, prophesied the fall of the northern kingdom or the kingdom of Israel, which was much more syncretistic or assimilated with the native Canaanite people and had some idolatrous content. And in 721, King Sargon of Agadi, the Assyrian ruler, came down from the north and conquered Israel and took the 10 northern tribes away, and they're called the 10 disappeared tribes. What's left is Judah and the little tribe of Benjamin, which eventually gets absorbed into Judah. And Judah is the source through Solomon and his descendants into the building of the first temple. And then that is destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BCE. And it is both Isaiah and Jeremiah who prophesy that this temple and the whole nation would be overturned and taken into exile because they were not treating each other with kindness and love. One of the images is that the temple falls because husbands and wives were no longer speaking to each other with love and respect. Pretty interesting image. Yeah. So that these prophets are all foretelling something, the message they are given, and they are speaking forth for a vision. And now vision is not simply something you see, it is something you experience. And the highest level of vision, ironically, is not what you see, but what you hear. When you hear God, the Holy One, speaking to you, giving you a mandate, as God did to Abraham and as God did with Jacob, and then with Joseph and Moses, et cetera, that mandate from voice to ear becomes the model for all humanity, speaking truth about what is given to you to speak versus what you choose to say for your own sake. That's one of the most major issues in Jewish morality.
And so how does this seems to reflect what is happening now. There is there are visions or words that are given to speak to humanity now, the same message about being kind to one another and serving one another.
Yes. And we have the contrast with whether it's Pharaoh or the Canaanite princes or the Assyrians or the Babylonians or the Persians or the Greeks or Byzantine culture or European Catholicism, Christianity, etc., which always wanted to take the voice of the Jews away because our experience is the root of everything else that developed. And that was not tolerable. So, without specific prophets, that prophecy ended with the last book of the Bible. And from then on, prophecy, it says prophecy no longer exists in the people or in individuals. It is now in the mouths of the rabbis and their students who must speak out and stand forth. And the rabbis in particular are considered to be the heirs of the prophets, so that the rabbis were always speaking out about injustice, about mistreatment, and that they warned the people that simply doing the offerings at the temple was simply insufficient because it didn't bring about a change in them. So you notice I use the word offering and not sacrifice, because the word in Hebrew is not sacrifice, it's korban, from the word karov, which means to draw close to, or cousin, to reestablish connection. So the offering is about giving something of value which you no longer see as valuable as the connection with the Holy One and with each other. So it is a misnomer to see the temple as a place of sacrifice. When I taught that in the Jesuit School of Theology and Bible, they were very shocked because they perceive that everything in the way they view the quote Old Testament had to do with sacrifice, more important, Jesus's sacrifice. And I said, just looking at the persona of Jesus from a Jewish perspective, that he fits in a whole genre of teachers, wandering preachers in his period. And what he did was he offered himself. And as part of that, those who misunderstood turned him into the figure he is, which I can tell you from my own experience, he regrets. The issue of worshiping a person, giving them that status, which is so opposite of the nature of prophecy in the Hebrew Bible and in the rabbinic tradition, is that any of us who are given some wisdom that's part of our soul purpose is to enact the speaking, the words, the inaction, the doing, the being of that which is the most accomplished, beautiful, genuine, honest, truthful part of our living, regardless of the consequences. Mm-hmm. That there is no reward for doing this other than the reward of doing that which you were sent to do, which means you're not handsome, you're not pretty, you're not famous, you're not rich. Some of the greatest of the examples of both the biblical prophets and of the rabbis and of the sages, and even into the contemporary period, is that those with the greatest wisdom to share frequently lived on the edge of poverty or were ignored. So uh, this issue of seeking position is totally the opposite of what it's about. So when I talk about prophetic vision, it's not about me. It's only about what message I've been given to send, which is why at age, I guess it was 73, I finally began to talk about it because I didn't want people to think I was seeking for position.
Right. So can we move on to
Sure.
describe your can you describe your fifth NDE, and for example, when and how did that occur?
My fifth NDE is the third lung collapse that I had as a result of the influenza that damaged my lungs so severely in 1985. I caught a cold, but I had been working 100, 125 hours a week between Neve Shalom, our synagogue, my practice. I was seeing 40 people a week, and everyone was an hour and a half. And then I was working, teaching at University of Judaism and other places. So I was really overextended and not taking very good care of myself, which is forbidden. I caught a cold in December, and in January, I had the third lung collapse. And this was by far the worst. I was in Cedar Sinai for about 5 weeks before they got my lungs working on their own.
Now this was 2005, right?
This was 2005.
Okay.
And just as I was getting ready to leave to go home, I got hit with this horrible pain in my lower right abdomen, which is around where the appendix is. So they all thought that it was appendicitis. When that didn't show up, they thought it was something in my colon. That didn't show up. They ran an MRI. Never do an MRI on Friday because nobody reads it until Monday. And by then, they discovered that I had a massive shingles infection that went from T1112 down to L5S1, namely, that's the middle of my back, all the way down to the top of my sacrum. And that what shingles does is it strips the myelin sheath off the nerve from the tip of the nerve all the way back to the spinal cord. And the myelin sheath is what transmits the messages that go from one nerve cell to another. And when that myelin sheath is stripped off, whatever messages are delivered in pain. So all of my skin nerves, called dermatomes, from that area in my back all the way around to the center of my belly were level 10 plus pain. And then it got even worse because farther down into that area are something called motor neurons. Those are the nerves that run the muscles, and they got stripped so that I ended up with enormous spasms. And so I have had level 10 pain both in my skin and in my muscles since 2005. And in learning to handle that pain, I began with massive doses of opioids that I won't detail here. They're the kind that eventually people become addicted to. But I very early realized that if I sustained myself on these, that I was going to lose my mind. And so with the spiritual help and techniques and methods I had been teaching others, and new ones that I'd been given that I now teach to others, I was able to get myself off of the drugs within 2 years. So now I manage the skin pain with compression belts and with a lot of constant ongoing meditative work that's going on right now while we're talking. The other is that no matter what I do spiritually, there's no way to contact those motor neurons. So I only take antispasmodic medication when the muscles start to spasm, because they've said that given the way it works, I could end up having a broken back. So I've lived with that now up until today. Right now, my pain is about a level 8, but I don't let it take me over, because that's the pain in my body, not the pain in my consciousness, in my soul. And I've learned to distinguish between pain and suffering. And there are times when it's bad that I feel suffering, but most of the time I don't suffer, but I do have pain. And there are times I wake up in the middle of the night screaming at the top of my lungs until I get the meds in to calm down the spasms. Otherwise, what I've learned from the pain is how to help others through their pain, not just the physical, but the emotional, the psychological, the cognitive, and the brain structure for pain. And then finally, the spiritual. What is the purpose of our having pain that is given to us as part of our tikkun? Because I was told very early in my life that I would experience a great deal of pain of different kinds, and that my task was to turn the pain into purpose
So,
so that I could teach others how to do the same.
so this was the well, not a prophetic vision, I guess, but your mission, your tikkun, that you were to carry this knowledge that you're developing to others. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. And the vision of that NDE was that as my lungs collapsed the third time, and again there was this relief of not having to breathe. Each time I have an NDE, I go farther out. And there's a limit, a place in which you go that you can't return. And the seventh one took me actually a step beyond in order to show me what it was I was to come back with. When I talk about it, I'll tell you. But now, on the fifth, that I went out farther than I ever had, and I met ancestors of mine who had felt great pain through very historical experiences that have been documented in history, some with specific names, and that my task was, if I was willing to manage and overcome my pain as they did, that I might become a vessel to teach others. And ever since 2005, in all of my practice and my work with individuals and groups, it has been oriented toward, in the relieving of trauma, what causes trauma is pain. And pain is either physical, psychological, emotional, but it's all generated by trauma. So that sometimes the greatest of disaster traumas are the greatest challenge for you to rise above what has been taken from you so that you may receive that which is next in your stage of development, for which you will be given a voice to speak forth. And the vision is of yourself, or the ani, the soul essence, being more and more realized, and the preoccupation with the physical begins to fade. And that's what's happened to me.
So you were advised not to speak about your experiences until after the turn of the century.
Correct.
And and of course, 2005 is after the turn of the century. So after this NDE, how do you feel that you can now speak publicly about your experiences? And, when did you start about speaking about them, and what are you saying now?
I actually didn't speak of them directly, but in the classes I was teaching at the University of Judaism. And just to clarify, this was the adult school, not just the rabbinic school. I would teach, there were 4 semesters, and I would teach 2 classes a semester, every one of the 4 semesters for 12 years. And I had large groups of people who came to study with me from all walks of life, not just Jewish, but other religions, and scientists and atheists and all kinds of people, and even those who had serious illnesses who came without telling me and asked me if I knew what their illness was, and I was able to tell them, and they said that's exactly what the doctor told me. If you ever want a story about that, I'll be glad to share it. But each time that would happen, I would say, I want you to understand something. I'm not speaking for me. This is not my being a magician, my being someone who is given great powers. I am simply voicing that which I am told. I am only a conduit, a means to voice in this world what it is that is part of your tikkun as you move through this world. So I'm very clear as I work in classes, in groups, and in individuals who I've seen since the early 90s, not to ever see me in an exalted way. In fact, more importantly, to understand that whatever I'm able to accomplish with someone is in fact something that happens to me. So that all of these experiences are an exchange. They're shared. It's not I do this or I do that. It is we who work to accomplish something. And it is, for me, all of the people who have come to me to work in this fashion that have contributed to my survival all these years.
Thank you.
Do you want to know more of the spiritual beings that took me, the dimensions I went through
Yes.
on the 5th NDE?
Yes. I think that would be very helpful for our listeners.
Each time I've left, there are different groups of shomrim, that come to me. Some of them are old ones that I recognize. Some of them are new that I've never had before. And they are part of what is the next stage of learning.
These are your guides.
Yeah, these are my guides.
Yes,
So let me tell you a story that I don't think I told you about the NDE in 91, because it's very important. I was very sick after the NDE and lung collapse in 91. And I was referred to a great doctor, acupuncturist and homeopath named Jim Bleckman. And I went to see Jim, and he interviews everybody for 2 hours. And at the end of the 2 hours, he said, I usually don't do this, but I feel that you could really benefit from acupuncture, which I had never had. And he had a little cubicle room that was painted pink, that had no windows, and that most of his patients didn't want to go into. But he took me in there and he put in the needles, and I was there for 3 hours. And he said, I've never seen this before. And I would come back every week. And once I was in that room for almost 8 hours on the needles. And on them, my shomri, my guides would come to me. The most important part was, Jim would come in periodically and I would be out wherever I was and he would adjust the needles and move them.
Wow.
So I'm deep in wherever I was, and suddenly I see Jim at my side and he takes my hand, he squeezes it, and I said, you've come to adjust the needles. And we talk a little bit, and suddenly I say, you're not Jim Bleckman. And he said, no, I'm one of your shomrim. And I said, is this real? And he said, how would you know? I said, I guess if I open my eyes and Jim is in the room, then I know it's Jim. But if I open my eyes and no one's there, then I'll know it's real. So the persona said, open your eyes. And I said, I don't want to, because I don't want this to end. So he squeezed my hand and he said, Shlomo, my Hebrew name then, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes and the room was empty and dark. And the candle that Jim always lit was there. And I could see it was alone. And yet I felt the presence hand in mine. And then he squeezed it hard. And I heard him say, come back. And I closed my eyes and there I was with him, only it wasn't him. And he said, I am your Abba. I am your father, your spiritual father. And he identified himself as the Ari, as Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, Isaac Luria, the great compiler of the source of contemporary Kabbalah. And his face shifted and changed, and I saw him as he had been pictured in some of the ancient drawings. And he said, I have a gift for you. And he held up what looked like a needle, an acupuncture needle, but it was glowing. And I realized it was made of sapphire. And he said, Moses carried a sapphire staff. All of the Nevi'im, all of those who speak forth for God, have sapphire within them somewhere. And I brought a sapphire to heal you. And he took the pin and he stuck it in my heart. And I felt it go in, and I was suffused with this incredible brightness. It's called light, but light is just a vessel. But the presence that I had never experienced in such totality, and the statement, "I love you," and the life I had gone through up until then, there were doubts about whether I could ever truly be loved for who I am or what I'm becoming. And this being suffused with his presence, that I began to glow like the needle that was stuck in my heart. And he said, "I am always with you wherever you go, and wherever you want to send me, to whatever persons that need my presence, along with all of the rest of your guides who I met." He introduced me to all of them. And they've been present for me ever since. So in this fifth NDE came Luria and Adam and the Shekhinah, who come to accompany every soul that rises the corporate world. Instead of walls and stuff, just it all just disappeared. And remember, I said that for me, it's not a tunnel, it's a shedding.
Yes.
So each level of going through the tunnel was being relieved of another layer of physicality. And each time one was removed, more of my physical, my psychological, my emotional, my identity simply fell away. This great relief. And as it happened, I went through my life review at each one of those dimensions. And if you want to talk about pain, that's when pain happens. Because in the life review that I experienced, you not only see your life as you saw it, but you see your life through the eyes of others who saw you. And boy, that is painful and shameful. And I mean, embarrassment isn't even the word. And then there is the view of those who I hurt and who hurt me, and the knowing that I will meet these souls, these nishamot, in the place of healing. And as I finally finished moving through the last dimension, and I was there present with these nishamot that both were welcoming me, and those who were presenting themselves to make a healing for what they did to me, and those who came to me to give me the opportunity to heal for what I had done to them. And as I said, the greatest of all challenges is to surrender being a victim. And in my life, it was so easy to live as a victim because of things that had been done to me. And I even now have come to understand that part of what I'm facing due to my back has to do with some of that, which I'll tell you when I get to that NDE, because the those who hurt you generally don't do it to your face. They do it behind your back with gossip, with innuendo, or by telling you you're not what you think you are, and which had happened to me a great deal in my life. So relieving myself of all of that created a sense not only of healing and well-being, but an expanded sense of purpose, that now I understood why these things had occurred to me in this world and what it was I could bring back to be of aid to others. And it was in this enormous NDE of 2005, when I returned, I came back into this body and filled with agony. And it was impossible. I wanted to resist, to not go back. And I was given the choice to not go if I wanted to.
Oh.
They said, this one is up to you. And I suddenly realized that if I was given the choice to stay, all of the work that I had been doing all my life, let alone everything else that I would be given to do for the rest of my life, would not be done. I wouldn't be here talking to you or to all the other people I've worked with since 2005, including NDE 6 and 7. So I chose to return, and stepping into this shattered body, I don't even know how to tell you what it feels like to begin breathing when you can't breathe, to begin feeling when all you feel is pain, or all, not what you feel, when all I feel was I can't breathe, and all I experienced is I'm in such pain, I can't even explain it. And I began the process of learning to apply the breathing that I mentioned in an earlier NDE to myself, and the relief of pain that they infused in me as I returned back into the shattered body. They gave me the tools, the methodology, the system for working on spirit, mind, brain, nervous system, immune system, and body to effectuate a healing process for all of those who I was to work with and to share with. So here I am. And these malachim are part of what I referred to in Isaiah's vision that appears in his book when he goes into the temple and he sees God sitting on a throne surrounded by the quote malachim, the messengers. And he says, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzvaot, holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. Malocho la'aretz kavodo, the whole physical being is filled with his presence. In other words, there is no separation between above or below, that it is all seamlessly joined together. It's what the church called the Sanctus, and understanding that the first line, the Kadosh, is male, and the second line, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed, is feminine. It is the Shekhinah presence in physicality that come together. And then the visions that flow from that, from Jeremiah and Ezekiel onward, of this incredible unified presence, that God has never abandoned us, that the whole being of existence is a vessel of God's presence. And the female dimension of that, like females, like the uterus, hold it all together so that it can mature. And our job, the male job, is to keep turning it over to find out what's next. And frequently we do that with great loving accomplishment, and frequently, like those through world history or what we're experiencing now turn it over for their own sake to see what is waiting for them. And that's the free will that we are given and the power of each of our souls that we can turn away from the source and the tikkun that we are given to accomplish completion, shlemut, shalom, synergy, or we can turn into lies, deception, manipulation, or as I said before, the word ra comes from the word which means deception, to tear things apart. And we know that the role of what we call evil in the world is to tear apart that which has put together. That's the challenge that we're facing in this country now, and the world is facing with this virus. And so I was told that my job, my role in my tikkun was to speak forth. And so from 2005 on, in various capacities, I have been speaking forth. And it is only when I was finally led to IONS that I finally began to speak directly about NDEs. Because when I had tried it before, everybody would roll their eyes and say, oh, there he goes again. Right. But now I have a family, a transcendent supernal soul family, and I am in a place from which speaking is a shared process. It's not just me alone, but I am part of a great voicing of the world's souls that know about the different meaning of life and its purpose.
So,
Thank you.
what, yeah, we're about done. Yes. Okay.
Did I answer your question?
Thank you. As Suzanne was pointing out, I think we have exceeded our time here. So I think that we need to continue this discussion in the next session, and then it will be important to go on to the next NDE, number 6, because that seems to be a very critical, important turning point for you, and that's what we should do in the next session.
I look forward to it. And in that session, I will give you the names of the malachim, the angels who accompanied me.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll end the session right now.
Thank you. God bless.
And God bless you.